There's a lot to love about Celeste. The platforming is smooth, the art style is adorable, and the soundtrack is incredible. But when I first played it, none of these things are what stood out to me. After all, any indie platformer worth its salt has solid platforming art and music. What stood out to me about Celeste was its storytelling. And I'll be explaining why by unpacking my favorite level in the game. Chapter 6, Reflection. Before we begin, there will obviously be spoilers. If you play video games, you should definitely play this game for yourself. If you don't play video games, you should still consider it. Besides all the compliments I've already given it, Celeste is cheap, fairly short, and has generous difficulty options to make sure anyone can beat it. Still here? Let's begin. Before analyzing Chapter 6, I'll give a short summary of Chapters 1 through 5. Celeste is a game about climbing a mountain. Sort of. You play as Madeline, a 20-something woman suffering from anxiety and depression who comes to Celeste Mountain to prove to herself that she can accomplish something impressive. On the climb, she runs into Theo, another climber who is also just the best. However, she quickly realizes that Celeste is not a normal mountain when it turns her inner demons into outer demons in the form of a doppelganger the fanbase has named Madeline. She tells Madeline that she doesn't have what it takes to climb the mountain, and tries to stop her in order to protect her. Nevertheless, Madeline continues her climb, running into Theo and Madeline several times along the way. During one of these encounters, Madeline starts going through a panic attack, and Theo teaches her a way to calm herself down by imagining a feather. And that brings us to Chapter 6. For a platformer, this level has an unusual start. Madeline and Theo are sitting around a campfire, talking. I wish I could go through this entire conversation, but it is 10 minutes long, so I'll just stick to the broad strokes. This conversation gives us a lot of much-needed insights into the characters' minds. Madeline's home life, Theo's relationship with his grandfather, and why both characters are on the mountain are just a few of the topics. You also get to choose which topics are discussed, allowing you to skip any you aren't interested in, or end the conversation early. But if you would rather see all of the dialogue, you can. This conversation also provides a nice change of pace after the end of Chapter 5, which was intense. The music during this section, which you've been listening to, is simple but very clever. The name of the track is Madeline and Theo, which is exactly what the music is. It is a combination of Theo's theme, represented by the guitar, and Madeline's theme, represented by the piano. Towards the end of the conversation, Madeline tells Theo that she plans to destroy Madeline. Theo expresses some concern that that would negatively affect Madeline, but Madeline is convinced that it is the only way she can be free of Madeline's influence. The conversation ends with Madeline wanting to remember the night with a selfie, calling back to a moment in Chapter 2 where Theo surprises her with a selfie. Putting the two side by side, we can clearly see the character growth Madeline has been through, and how much her confidence and self-image have improved over the course of her climb. Our first bit of gameplay in this level comes in what is clearly a dream, where we are introduced to the level's first new mechanic. This feather, which is reminiscent of the feather Theo taught Madeline to focus on, lets us move in any direction we want after we collect it. But for now, we use it to go up. This section sees Madeline traveling upwards with great speed, almost as if she could fly. And flight symbolizes freedom. Safe in the belief that she will soon be free of her inner demons, Madeline's spirit soars as if there were nothing weighing her down. But she celebrates too soon. Madeline appears in front of her, and the two begin to chat. Madeline tells Madeline that it's time to say goodbye, that she's leaving Madeline on the mountain, and that this will be better for both of them. Madeline does not take this news well, and starts to attack Madeline, who starts to panic, until she remembers the feather. Everything fades out as the feather takes center stage, and we watch it rise up and down as Madeline regains control. Up and down. Up and down. Up, and it breaks. The feather isn't enough. Now, fully enraged, Madeline tears Madeline out of the sky, ending her flight and her freedom, and drags her down to the campfire and even further below. And this isn't just a physical fall. There's a motif in Celeste that Madeline's physical altitude corresponds to her emotional well-being. The higher up she is, the closer she is to surpassing her issues, with reaching the summit being symbolic for conquering her inner demons. So, when she falls back down to the foot of the mountain, she also hits an emotional rock bottom. This failure is extremely important narratively. There is the obvious reason that good stories need rise and fall, and a story where the protagonist only succeeds isn't very engaging. But this principle is especially important for a story about mental health, because that is a true back and forth. You'll start to make progress, you'll think that you've crushed your issues, and then you'll have one bad day that drags you back down to rock bottom. To not give Madeline one of those days would be a disservice to this nuanced topic. When we return to gameplay, Madeline rests in the middle of a lake. This is more than just a poor excuse as to how she survived the fall. It's meant to reflect the description of depression she just gave in her conversation with Theo. It's like, I'm at the bottom of the ocean. I can't see anything in any direction. I'm just floating in this abyss, swimming in a random direction, hoping that I find something. To reinforce this idea, this entire section feels aimless. The music doesn't build to anything, and the level seems to branch out infinitely to make it feel like you aren't headed anywhere in particular, just picking a random direction. Even the little collectibles that litter every chapter to give you an extra little sense of achievement are gone. Because what's the point? When Madeline fell, she didn't just lose her physical progress, but also her emotional progress. She's given up. She couldn't do it. Madeline was right. Now she just needs to get back to her car so she can go home. But before she can do that, she sees someone. At various points in the game, Madeline has run into a crazy old lady who lives on the mountain. And while this lady isn't the most polite, she offers several nuggets of wisdom. First, she says that Madeline needs to talk to Madeline, that she needs to understand her instead of just throwing her away. Second, she points out that healing is confrontational, and that the first step of fixing a problem is facing it. Finally, she lets Madeline, and the player, know that they don't need to be ready to face their problems yet. There is no set timetable to follow for fixing yourself. If Madeline wanted to go home, that would be okay. Someday, she would be ready to return. But Madeline doesn't go home. She pushes on to confront Madeline, not to destroy her, but to understand how to control her worst impulses. And as Madeline gains this new purpose, the game responds. The formerly aimless music gains a beat. The path stops branching and instead starts to constrict as Madeline pushes on into the darkness. The difficulty of the game lets up, abandoning the trial and error format of most levels and gaining a real sense of momentum. Madeline is charging forward to face her problems. She is focused, and she will not be stopped. Before long, you find Madeline sitting in a hole. Madeline starts to apologize and tries to get Madeline to help her climb out of here, but Madeline refuses, saying Madeline isn't trustworthy, and we enter a quote-unquote fight. And while this isn't our first encounter with Madeline in gameplay, the two sections could not be more different. When we first meet Madeline in Chapter 2, she starts to follow Madeline's footsteps, forcing Madeline to run away. This time, the roles have switched. Madeline isn't running from her problems anymore. She's confronting them. She's running straight at Madeline, as Madeline does everything in her power to keep Madeline away. About halfway through the encounter, there's a break for dialogue, where Madeline starts saying things like, "You aren't a mountain climber," and "None of this would have happened if you had just listened to me," which is exactly how the voice in our head sounds. "You're not good enough. I'm here to help." But the voice is wrong, and this section ends with Madeline using the feather to finally reach Madeline. Madeline approaches Madeline as she's sitting on the ground. Now Madeline's the one who's given up. She says that she'll try to leave if that's what Madeline wants, but Madeline says that that isn't what she wants, and that the two of them need to work together to get out of here. And then they embrace. For this moment, it's important to remember that Madeline is a part of Madeline. What Madeline is saying here is that there isn't just something wrong with her. There isn't some part of her that is just evil, that she could destroy to fix all of her problems. Madeline thought she was helping, even if she did more harm than good. Madeline has mental issues, but she needs to learn to control them instead of trying to brute force them out of her head. And once she comes to terms with this, she gets a level up. She is stronger than she was before, so the gameplay reflects this change, giving her an extra dash to use in midair. Madeline uses this new ability to climb out of the hole she and Madeline dug themselves into, as my favorite track in the game plays. Why is it my favorite? Listen to the music that plays when we first meet Madeline. Now listen to that track again. It's just Madeline's theme, but now it's on piano, Madeline's instrument. Madeline is now in control of Madeline, and this track is symbolic of that. It is impossible to die during this section because the storm is past. Madeline is in control of her mind, and to have any risk during this section would undermine that feeling. The level ends with the old lady and Theo showing up to congratulate Madeline, and to encourage her that she can make it to the summit. Theo asks if he can help, and Madeline lets him hold on to her bag, finally letting go of her emotional baggage and letting her friend help her carry the load. It's important to note that the game isn't saying that Madeline's problems are gone for good. Chapter 7 is the longest level in the game, and there are still plenty of deaths ahead. Madeline and Madeline will get into a fight in one of the bonus levels. But whatever happens, Madeline knows what to do. She is strong enough to reach the summit. She can do this. Now to answer the title question. Why is Celeste's Chapter 6 so special? A large part of that is the subject matter, and how personally it approaches this delicate topic. Both the lead designer, Matt Thorson, and the composer, Lena Raine, have gone on record to say that their work on Celeste was rooted in their own struggles with mental health. On top of that, there's the way in which Celeste tells its story using every tool at its disposal. Plenty of games keep story and gameplay separate. The story is told through text and cutscenes, while the gameplay is just allowed to do its own thing. Which makes sense. People have been using words and video to tell stories for a long time, but telling stories through gameplay is a much newer idea. That said, not using gameplay to help tell the story is like if I did this entire video without using any music or images, just my voice. It isn't reaching its full potential. So while this level does start with a 10-minute conversation, the story doesn't stop when the dialogue does. From the upward climb of the beginning to the aimless wandering of the first half, and from the momentous charge towards Madeline to the safe climb out of the pit, every section has a story purpose as well as a gameplay one. And that is what makes Celeste's storytelling so special. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to do all of those YouTube things, and hopefully I will see you again soon.